My name's Mandy Murillo, and I'm going to be your moderator for this event. I'm Safe Horizons Director of Corporate Partnerships, and in this role, I have the privilege of leading our corporate fundraising program. I get to work with corporate partners every day to create lasting impact for survivors. I want to tell you just a little bit about Safe Horizon. Safe Horizon is the nation's leading victim services agency. We serve 250,000 New Yorkers each year across a spectrum of services that you can see listed here. But I want to tell you just a little bit more about how we started. We were founded in the Brooklyn court system in 1978 out of a need for survivor advocacy. Courts and the legal system are very intimidating places, and survivors of domestic violence would be navigating the court and the system, all while facing a person who would cause them harm. We started as advocates, helping survivors navigate the system to seek justice, but also we wanted to offer compassion and support for survivors throughout this process. And since 1978, we've expanded to over 150 locations in all 5 boroughs. And this includes our 8 domestic violence shelters, our street work project for youth, our child advocacy centers, and much, much more. I want to dive into our agenda, but before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick trigger warning. Sexual assault can stir a number of emotions, and I just want to remind everyone on this call today to please take care. Today, we're joined by my colleagues who work each day with survivors in our Crime Victims Advocate program, and they're going to walk us through the scope and impact of sexual assault and violence, ways that we can support survivors, what a survivor's rights are, and provide critical resources. Our Crime Victims Advocate program, or CVAP as we know it, works directly to support survivors in police precincts throughout the city. I also want to encourage our audience to send questions that you want to ask our experts. You can send them anonymously. We have an open Q&A session. Please direct them to Safe Horizon, who you'll see in the chat. And with that, I'm pleased to pass this to my colleagues, Victoria and Braley, for their introductions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Maiello. I'm a supervisor with the Crime Victim Assistance Program. I've been with Safe Horizon since 2017, initially as an advocate in Queens and now as a supervisor overseeing the Manhattan and Queens Special Victims Division. And my pronouns are she and her, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to my other colleague, Braley.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Braley Amaro. I've been with Safe Horizon for 5 years. I first started in Manhattan, now one of the CVAP managers for Queens, where I oversee 4 precincts. My pronouns are he, his. I'll pass it on to Mandy, who will now discuss some of the polls.
Thanks so much, Braley. So before we hear more from Braley and Victoria, let's just take a moment as an audience and do a baseline knowledge check. We all have an idea of what sexual assault is, and we're going to work to dispel some myths today. So we're going to put up a poll in just a second. Take a moment, answer anonymously, but our poll is true or false. Every 5 minutes, someone is sexually assaulted in the US. So go ahead and feel free to answer that. All right, I see a bunch of responses coming in. Just give it one more second. All right, so let's go ahead and see what the answer is. So it's actually false. Instead of every 5 minutes, it's every 68 seconds someone is sexually assaulted in the US, which is a staggering statistic. So we just have one more knowledge check. And the question is true or false again. So we're going to let this poll come up. Once you see it, feel free to answer. The majority of sex crimes are committed by strangers. True or false? And if you don't know, that's totally fine too. All right, so I think we're hitting about a critical mass here. So thank you all for answering these polls. So let's go ahead and see what the answer to this is. It's actually false. So it turns out 8 out of every 10 sexual assaults are committed by someone known to the victim. You can see the breakdown here, but it looks like only 7% are strangers to the victim. So I'm going to go ahead now and pass this back to Braley and Victoria and let them share a little bit more about sexual assault and what it is. So go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mandy. Like you earlier mentioned through the agenda, we're going to go through what is sexual assault, how does sexual assault affect survivors, and what's important to know about the healing process. So sexual violence is an umbrella term that we use to recognize all the different forms of sexual abuse. It refers to any sexual behavior or act that's committed against a person's will. So when we're talking about a person's will, we refer to something called consent. Does the person consent to a sexual activity? This includes sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, cyber abuse, and coercion. And this is only some of the different forms of abuse. There are many different forms that are not included, but with the advancements of technology, there's deep fakes that are now an issue in the sexual assault field, and revenge porn continues to be a pervasive issue. So we're going to take some time to go through some statistics in regards to vulnerable communities when it comes to sexual violence. 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, and by the hands of their intimate partners, a majority is of the sexual violence. 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. So we want to highlight this number just because it is less likely for men to report sexual assault. This is due to some of the misinformed myths out there. So men can't experience sexual assault, or women experience a bigger impact, or sexual assault determines someone's sexual orientation. Survivors' sexual abuse does not determine whether someone's sexual orientation. And women and men, they have some similarities and differences when it comes to sexual abuse impacts, but they're equally impacted. And the most vulnerable community of sexual abuse is committed against Indigenous and African American women, 4 in 5 bisexual women, and over 56% of bisexual men report experiencing sexual violence in their lifetimes. So since we talked about some of the impacts in regards to statistics, I'm going to pass it over to Briley to talk about how sexual violence can impact a survivor.
Thank you, Victoria. So how are survivors affected and impacted by sexual assault? Sexual assault can affect survivors in many different ways. Emotionally, it may cause shock, fear, or intense sadness. Physically, it may come up with folks having injuries or trouble sleeping and eating. And mentally, it could lead to PTSD, depression, or difficulty concentrating. Some might feel the effects right away, while others may take time to process. How someone reacts can change over time. Each survivor's experience is unique, and they need the support that understands their trauma. Some things also that may come up are mood swings or irritability. Mental and emotional stress could cause impact performance on their work or school. Some folks may also turn to substance abuse in order to cope, while others may have a heavy toll of guilt and shame, as well as self-blaming. I'll now go into what healing looks like. Healing looks different for everyone. It can include seeking support from an advocate, reaching out and getting support from a trustworthy friend or family members, or seeking professional support from a therapist or mental health expert. It's great to establish boundaries with people and environments, and also managing triggers. Engaging in empowering activities is also another way in order to heal and cope. Some folks may like joining a peer support group, while others may join a self-defense course. It's important to highlight that being patient and taking care of oneself is crucial to begin the healing process. I now pass it on to Victoria, who will discuss the Survivors' Bill of Rights.
I wanted to follow up on what Braley was saying in regards to healing. So the Survivors Bill of Rights is something that was passed by the Department of Health, which gives survivors rights in different settings. So their general rights, their rights in the hospital, and rights to reporting what happened. This can be used as a tool for healing when they seek support. So it's important to know, I'll be covering just a few of those rights. It's important to know as someone, if your immigration status does not determine your access to services, and if you need an interpreter, you can ask for one if you don't speak English or if it's hard to understand. When you're in the hospital, you have the right to an advocate to accompany you, and a visit you can always request at your local rape crisis program. When you're in a law enforcement setting, you also have the right to an advocate to accompany you during the interview process, and you have the right to receive contact information for your investigator and your advocates. So you'll see on the second page, there's a contact sheet for the police agency, prosecuting agency, and the advocate agency with the name and phone number. So on the website we provided in the chat, it has access to these rights, and also they have it in several different languages. So then we'll jump into the Adult Survivors Act. That was passed in 2022, which allows survivors, create a pathway for survivors who were sexually assaulted as adults, but were prevented by the statute of limitations from suing their abusers. That law, in the window of 1 year in 2023, resulted in 3,700 cases. You may be familiar with some high-profile cases that recently came out. One with E. Jean, and that really emphasizes, as we talked about consent earlier, how power dynamics play a role in whether someone is able to consent. So I'm going to go ahead.
I have a really quick question for you, and I think everyone might be curious about this too. With the Adult Survivors Act, can you let us know how this might have impacted your daily work, seeing that you work with survivors? Has this created an influx of survivors coming forward?
Yes, so survivors definitely reached out to understand what this Adult Survivors Act meant and whether this is something that they can apply for. So the 3,700 number doesn't only represent cases, but also represents people who decided to come forward and share their story to receive justice.
Thank you so much for that.
So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Braley so he can talk about some resources.
Thank you,
I'm
Victoria.
Sorry, no.
Go ahead.
Before we go into resources, we wanted to talk about what you can do to support someone you love, whether they're your friend, your family, or it's just someone you know. After experiencing sexual violence, the survivor may experience blame. So it's important when someone shares their story with you that you listen with non-judgmental ears. Believe the survivor and let them know that you believe them. Make sure that you keep it confidential. Even though they shared it with you, they may not want other people to know. So remember, whenever they're sharing it, that if you need to ask them if they can share with anyone. You can't share their information without them knowing. When you're speaking with them, you can offer them options. You can talk about what resources might be helpful for them, but it's important to let them make their own decisions. Remember, sexual violence is abuse of power, and they're taking away someone's decision. It's important that you give them the decision to seek resources if they're ready for it. And remind them they're not alone. They have loved ones, family, and friends to support them, and they also have resources available to them.
Thank you, Victoria, for that. I'll now go over some of the resources and programs that Safe Horizon offers in order to help clients heal. So we offer several resources for survivors to be in healing, such as our counseling center, which provides trauma-informed therapy to help survivors process their experiences and emotions. We also have a 24/7 hotline and safe chat option, which is able to help clients connect with us at all hours of the day. our emergency shelters, which provide safe and temporary housing for survivors. And we also have our child advocacy centers, which provide a safe space for child survivors of abuse, which help get them connected with needed services. We also have our anti-trafficking program and community program, as well as our court and legal programs. We'll now dive into the Crime Victim Assistance Program, which is a collaborative program between NYPD and Safe Horizon. Our CVAP program pretty much has 77 precincts and PSAs where there's advocates available Monday through Friday from the hours of 8 to 6 p.m. Our advocates work with victims of both domestic violence and general crime, offering guidance, helping navigate victims through the criminal justice system. Advocates can connect folks with needed services, such as counseling, financial assistance, shelter placement, and also help clients fill out OVS applications, which could help with medical bills, transportation, reimbursement for broken or lost items. Advocates are also responsible with creating safety plans that tailor to the needs of the clients. They partner with NYPD on home visits, and they also work as liaisons between the community and law enforcement by doing community outreach events and by doing police roll call trainings. We also connect clients with local community partners for long-term support and case management. I'll pass it back to Victoria, who will now discuss the expansion of the CVAP program, which led to all the SCD programs being in the 5 boroughs.
Thanks, Braley. You did a great job explaining all the amazing work that we do in the precincts. CVAP has come a long way. As we started in 1984 in a smaller scale in some of the precincts in New York City, we expanded in 2016 to be in all 77 precincts. And in 2019, we expanded to the Special Victims Division. So currently now we have advocates in each borough at each Special Victims Division to support survivors walking in. So now I'll talk a little bit more before we move on about what our impact is. I know we went over what our role looks like, but what's our impact as we work in Special Victims Division? As we are co-located in the NYPD space, we provide access to information to help them navigate through this difficult time. And then we also provide them with assistance with safety planning and accompaniments during the interview process. So being co-located in a space with the NYPD allows us to collaborate with NYPD and help the victim. We're a bridge between the victim and the law enforcement agency. So to highlight the benefits of this program, we wanted to talk about a case study. So this case study is a hypothetical scenario where we'll be talking about a sexual assault survivor. So this would be a trigger warning as well. Myra was sexually assaulted 10 years ago by a family friend who very bravely initiated the first step in the criminal justice process. When Myra first shared her story with her family, they didn't believe her. As Myra was waiting in the waiting room, she felt nervous and she was worried that no one would believe her. She wondered if she had waited too long to share her story. Amber, the Safe Horizon advocate, introduced herself and explained the process and explained what her role was at Special Victims. She spoke to her about the criminal justice process, explained the purpose of the interview and what questions might be asked. And then she explained what to expect after the interview. She then provided Myra with a copy of her Survivor's Bill of Rights. Myra agreed to have her present during her initial interview with the detective. During the interview, Amber noticed that Myra had become frustrated when she was describing the sequence of events and had a hard time explaining the chronological order of the events. Myra had shut down and the interview was not going as well as it usually does. Amber requested the detective speak with Myra alone, and Amber reassured Myra that she was doing a great job during the interview. She also told Myra that when someone experiences a traumatic incident, their brain will go into survival mode where they might not be able to store memories as well as they usually do. She assured her that this experience can be normal and can be common, and that, if she has any memories that come back up in the future, she can always share at a later date, that there was no pressure to share right now at the moment. They went back into that interview. Myra felt a lot more confident, and they were able to successfully complete the interview. After the interview, Amber and her created a safety plan together, and she was able to connect her to our counseling program. We bring up this case study to talk about the amazing work that we do as far as providing them with that emotional support during such a difficult time, and the information to resources to empower her to make those decisions on her own.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Victoria, and for just walking us through all the different services that CVAP provides. So before we segue into our question and answer session, I have an important CVAP update that I want to share with everyone on this call. In the recent budget that was passed from the city in July, CVAP received a 20% budget cut. And you might have heard about this from Safe Horizons posts, but what this ultimately means is that survivors' ability to access critical resources, such as all the ones that you just heard Myra be able to access, but and also help them navigate legal systems and feel seen, are going to be severely limited. This is all going to be negatively impacted by this cut. And it's important that we share what the current cuts are. And I want to thank Victoria Maiello for sharing all of this information. And we're going to go ahead and segue into our Q&A session now. So we actually have received quite a few questions, and I'm excited to get this moving. But before we do, I just want to kick it off with a quick question from myself personally. I love what you were talking about when you said that we should all be kind to ourselves. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you tell clients and survivors how to be kind to themselves?
Thank you for that question, Mandy. I think it's important, at times when we're working with clients and they think about the things that they could have or should have done, reminding them that they did their best and they're the captain of their ship. So in that moment, with the information that they knew, they made the best decision that they could for themselves. So to be easy on yourself and not to blame yourself for what happened.
Thank you for that. So I want to start with this first question that we got. Can you walk us through what the steps are to reporting a sexual assault?
Sure. So when you're thinking about reporting any sex crimes, you can consider speaking with an advocate first, or if you'd like to contact law enforcement first, there's a couple of options in the way you can do that. So you can report to your local precinct and make up a report, or you can call 911 to you. However, we also have an option. The NYPD has a sexual assault hotline where they'll take the report over the phone, and they'll set up an appointment for you with the Special Victims Division. So in the chat, we'll include that sex crime hotline with NYPD so that you guys can share with someone who may need it.
All great resources to be sharing today. And is all this information that we've been sharing only applicable to New York and New York City?
The hotline for the law enforcement's only for New York City. However, Safe Horizon also covers the New York City, the 5 boroughs. RAIN is a national organization that can refer you to a local resource if you have a client who is out of state or who is in a different part of New York.
Very helpful for that distinction. This one is actually a really great question. In your opinion, and this is for both of you, what are the most effective strategies for preventing sexual assault on college campuses, in workplaces, and within communities?
I would say clients could definitely speak out, informing a friend or a family member for emotional support, reaching out to law enforcement if needed. But I would say just bringing up like what happened with friends and family to get that emotional support, and then that way get connected with some form of law enforcement agency, as well as reporting it to the school or workplace.
I'd love to add on to that too. With college campuses, it's always helpful to have education around consent and provide a safe space for people to come forward, believing them so that more people are encouraged to come forward.
So important, and actually segues very nicely into this next question. Can you talk a little bit more about consent? Can consent be given multiple times? At any point, can consent be taken away?
Consent refers to two people agreeing to become sexually intimate with one another, and someone can consent verbally or through enthusiastic consent. However, it's important for consent that you understand who can and cannot consent. So I'm going to leave this in the chat for you all to answer. What is not considered consent, or what wouldn't be, who would not be able to consent to an intimate act? So I'll give you all a moment to put in the chat, and then we can cover who would not be able to consent. I'm seeing all correct answers. Anyone under 18, someone who's intoxicated, someone, an elderly person. If someone is, well, when we say elderly person, we also want to recognize that elderly persons do still have sex, but it could be unconsensual if they don't have the mental capacity, and that's determined by a doctor, of course. Disability. I think when we also talk consent, we also want to consider the power dynamics. Will somebody have a negative consequence if they say no? So when we think about those power dynamics, we can say a boss and an employee. The employee would not be able to consent. If we're thinking about a student and a professor, the professor has a power over the student, and they wouldn't be able to consent. A landlord and a tenant. There's a lot of different scenarios where someone can abuse their power, and that's primarily what sexual abuse is. It's an abuse of power.
Thank you
Thank
for
you everyone for those answers.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through all these different nuances with consent. We have a couple more questions here. If I'm being stalked, who can I reach out to?
I would say you can reach out to law enforcement, but another option, you could reach out to our 24/7 hotline and get connected with an advocate or one of the folks in one of our many programs for further support.
Thank you for that. And our final question of the day, can you discuss the importance of trauma-informed care within the context of sexual assault survivors?
I think when we work with clients, it's really important that we have a trauma-informed approach. So it's understanding how trauma could show up for them. And our goal is to avoid any re-traumatization of our clients. So for an example, when someone comes in and maybe they're upset and they're expressing that, and in the setting of law enforcement, they misperceive that as some type of myth that's out there. What we can do is advocate on behalf of them and inform them about psychoeducation, where this is how this is showing up for somebody, and like emphasizing, we never want to tell anyone what to do, and that's one of our primary values is empowering our survivors to make those decisions. Like I had mentioned earlier, for abuse, power is taken away, and our goal is to give the power back to our survivors.
Thank you for that. And that wraps, we have one more quick question. How can I support Safe Horizon? So we're actually about to cover that, but I want to just thank everyone for this really lively Q&A session. I know I came away with a lot of thought starters here. And before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to thank Victoria and Braley for all that they do, and their fellow CVAP colleagues for what they do for survivors each day. I know how busy you both are, and I want to thank you for taking the time to educate us. I want to give a quick reminder that this is recorded and the link to this session is going to be on Safe Horizons website, so you can feel free to share this with colleagues and friends after the event. And the question about how I can support Safe Horizon. I want to remind all of us that everyone in this room can come away from this training being an advocate for survivors. You can keep up with our work, including the CVAP program, by subscribing to our newsletter at www.safehorizon.org, or you can follow us on social media. You can also support our work and ensure our response to survivors by making a donation online at www.safehorizon.org/giving. I want to make a quick plug that right now we're running a match campaign through the end of July, and your gift's impact will be doubled. And in our final moments together, I want to just remind you once more, if you or someone you know needs help, Safe Horizons here, and our services are always accessible 24/7.
Now in setup mode. Follow the instructions in your Alexa app.
Thank you, Alexa. You can go ahead and call our hotline at 1-800-621-HOPE. That number again is 1-800-621-HOPE. You can remember it as 1-800-June-21st-HOPE. And we know that this was a tough topic to talk about. So we have a final grounding exercise for us all as we move back into our day with a refreshed mind. I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Ashley, who's going to lead us in our grounding moment.
Thank you, Mandy. So I'll ask everyone to begin by finding a comfortable position. Gently close your eyes and take a deep breath in and slowly release it out. Allow yourself to settle into this moment, feeling the support beneath you. As you continue to breathe deeply and evenly, bring your attention to the goal of this practice, to cultivate a non-judgmental awareness towards your thoughts and feelings. Recognize that right now, there's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. You are here to observe and be present with your inner experience. Now turn your awareness to any thoughts or feelings that arise. Perhaps they're related to your day, to your past, or to your future. Observe them as they are leaves floating on a stream, coming into view and then drifting away. There's no need to engage with them or judge them. Simply acknowledge their presence. If you find that certain thoughts are persistent, imagine them as clouds in the sky. Observe their shape, their movement, and then let them pass. Focusing back on the blue sky of your inner calmness. If your mind wanders, that's okay. It's the nature of the mind to think. Gently, with kindness towards yourself, guide your attention back to your breath. Feel the rise and fall of your chest, the air moving in and out of your lungs, the subtle movements of your body as you breathe. As we come to close of this meditation, take a few more deep, intentional breaths. With each inhale, gather a sense of peace. With each exhale, release anything that does not serve you. Remember, this sense of grounding and non-judgmental awareness is a tool that is always available to you. When you are ready, gently wiggle your fingers and toes, bringing some movement back into your body. Take your time, there's no rush. And when you feel ready, slowly open your eyes and return to your day with a newfound awareness and acceptance. Thank you all for participating in this exercise. I will pass it back to Mandy.
Thank you so much for that, Ashley. I definitely feel refreshed. I'm going to carry some kindness throughout my day. I want to just thank everyone again so much for joining us all. Thank you for learning with us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.